Hurts. I think that's how big a leap he could take. Now that the Bears were so smart and built that offensive line a little bit better, we're going to shift now a little bit further away from the quarterback conversation and we'll move towards the backfield, the position that most people care about the most, running back. What's interesting is Austin Eckler is ranked number 1 by ESPN, despite the fact that he wants a trade and he wants out of Los Angeles. Another interesting part is they brought in Kellen Moore, who's famous for being a pass-first offensive coordinator. Michael, we'll start with you. Do you like Austin Eckler being the number 1 running back according to ESPN, or would you put someone else there at the top?
So it all really does depend on what you're playing. Is it PPR, half PPR, or just standard points? With PPR, you can easily make a case for Eckler to be your number 1 back because he is not the rushing threat that you think of a NFL standard running back. He is a pass-catching back. So if it's full PPR, you can't go wrong with Eckler because he is a touchdown and PPR machine. But personally, I think Christian McCaffrey is still your clear-cut number 1 in all standards of the game.
I tend to agree with you, and part of the reason I feel that way is I like what scheme Christian McCaffrey is in far more. I feel like there are games Austin Eckler can be targeted, and it turns into a very pass-happy game for Justin Herbert, and Austin Eckler kind of shrinks. I feel like no matter what, Kyle Shanahan is going to get Christian McCaffrey involved in the 49ers offense, which makes me feel a little bit better. The only concern I have is his injury history. Adam, do you think Christian McCaffrey can play enough of a NFL regular season to justify him being drafted this high? Or do you feel like he is the classic, we project as a fantasy owner what he's done in the past onto this year, like a lot of people did with Derrick Henry last year, where you're drafting him in the first round too high, but he isn't going to be able to deliver what he did the previous season?
Well, yeah, I think it's the latter. I think that dual threat, obviously, he's probably the best dual threat back right now in the league that can be used to that advantage, but it's injuries, right? Injury to Carolina, injuries last year. So, yes, what he can do and what he can project is huge, but can he stay healthy? And looking at this list, it's a no-brainer right down the list. McCaffrey injuries, Taylor, Barkley, Henry, Pollard. You were right down the list. Delvin Cook missed some time last year. Mixon. I guess in my eyes, if you draft a running back, high in the draft, man, injury prone is such a high probability with some of these guys. You got to be really careful. I mean, Jonathan Taylor is, with him coming back from injury, they used him so much last year or the year before, you just wear him down, So these running backs, I guess my question would be is, do you weigh the reward of a dual-threat quarterback like McCaffrey getting yourself a lot of points versus the injury status with him? I guess that lean on you two guys. That as a novice fantasy guy, that my question is the risk worth the reward versus injury versus what you can get out of a weekly basis of points?
Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I say to me, I got to take the risk just because, as I alluded to before, that it's very top heavy in fantasy when it comes to running backs. So if your guy gets injured, yeah, you're screwed. But if not, you can be running away with the championship if you draft well.
If you draft the guy of the year, you can win the league. That can be enough sometimes. If you draft the guy who just goes off week after week, he can carry you throughout a season. And there are leagues that are won, especially, by the way, the weaker leagues where you're playing against some people who are adults. You can absolutely win because there are people who don't know how to put together a full roster that can compete with one guy who just dominates. That said, and to Adam, to your question, the one thing I would say is, yes, I would go after a McCaffrey, but I'd build in some insurance policies. I'd look to get Deebo Samuel. I'd make sure I draft Christian McCaffrey's backup. I want to make sure that I'm stacking my bench and maybe my wide receivers with 49ers as well. More to the Deebo Samuel because he can fill in that McCaffrey role, so that if he gets hurt and all of a sudden you lose out on McCaffrey the name, you're actually still picking up the San Francisco 49ers production that he would have accounted for. And that's what you're really caring about. Do you care about, this goes to the old Jerry Seinfeld joke of, are you rooting for a player or are you rooting for laundry? In fantasy football, it's more you're rooting for the player or you're rooting for a scheme or you're rooting for production. I'm really rooting for the 49ers running game or the 49ers dynamic offense. And that's where if I do target Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel to me has to be someone you go get. And if you're in an auction draft, it may mean you spend more. If you're in a snake draft, this is where you can get caught. Because what often happens is someone drafts Christian McCaffrey, like he's going to go early, so this may not happen with him, but it happens with other teammates where someone drafts one player and it almost reminds everyone in the league of like, oh, I like that offense too. I should go after a player on that offense. And all of a sudden you almost have a run on a certain team in a snake draft, and that can sometimes work against you when you want to build in some of that insurance policy. But I think Christian McCaffrey is worth the risk. Part of the reason I say that too is I think he's going to play so well behind Trent Williams in another year. But the only problem is, if I am looking for drawbacks on Christian McCaffrey, who's the quarterback? Sam Darnold? Is anyone fearing Sam Darnold right now? Is it Trey Lance? Like, who's the quarterback? Brock Purdy? Is he healthy yet? So that is something I'm concerned about. Michael, is there reason for you to avoid McCaffrey because of the quarterback situation in San Fran?
Honestly, no. Like later on in the season, they even used McCaffrey as a quarterback some plays. Like it just shows you how versatile McCaffrey is in the Shanahan offense. So I'm not too worried about that. I just think that if obviously the big if is the injuries, if he can sustain health throughout the season, I think he's the number one guy. He's a home run hitter.
One thing I wanted to call out in this list, Bijan Robinson is third on this list. If you're watching on TikTok Live, you can see the rookie running back. Yes, he is going to have a good year if he stays healthy. But really, the Atlanta Falcons offense, this isn't Jonathan Taylor entering the league and being behind the Colts offensive line of that time, which was loaded. Do we really believe that Bijan Robinson is the third best running back in fantasy? Is he? Really? Michael?
Here's the thing with Bijan is that they did not draft him not to be their workhorse, and I do believe he is going to be a lot better in the pass catching abilities as well. So I do think he's going to get a lot of reps. He could be what
even with Tyler Algier,
well, that's why they drafted Bijan so early, is to replace a lot of Algier's production. And the thing is that I view what the Falcons are going to do with Bijan, what the Steelers tried to do. The Steelers tried to do last year. The thing is, Bijan's. I think he's a stud, so I don't think you can go wrong. I just think 3 is way too high. He could be a 9, 10, maybe 11. But yeah, 3 is just way too high for me. I see that he could be a productive back in the league. 1,200 yards, could be bordering on 10 touchdowns. But in PPR, the pass catching is what I could see why he's getting rated a lot higher than he is.
First of all, we're getting some comments here on TikTok Live. Phil and Carter, I completely agree with you guys. I actually think this list of running backs isn't really that good. Again, this list comes from ESPN. This is one of their later lists. Kind of surprised with their rankings, who they have. I feel like ESPN right now has like a love affair with Bijan Robinson, which is both will be justified by his production over his rookie year. I do think he's going to be a stud, but I do think it's a little too quick to be like number 3 running back in fantasy football right now. It's a little too fast for me. Phil, you bring up an interesting one with Ramondre Stevenson at 13. And Damian Harris, gone from New England. You know the Patriots are still going to be a run-first offense. They're not. They haven't given Mac Jones nearly enough weapons in the passing game for me to think somehow that's going to tilt towards a pass-first offense. It's Bill O'Brien, so it's going to be run the ball, try to shorten the third down situation to like a 3rd and 4 or better, and that's how you're going to eat up clock, eat up yardage, and that's how the Patriots are going to win. Ramondre Stevenson could be a really good pick. Again, I wonder about his durability if he's not in a tandem back situation, but I really like him. I think he could be a really good pickup for somebody. The other one I wanted to bring up, and Adam, I bring him up for you because you're going to see plenty of him this year in the NFC North, and that's Jahmyr Gibbs. The Detroit Lions have made a bet on him moving on from DeAndre Swift. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to fill into that role. Obviously, they also got David Montgomery, who will kind of play that Jamal Williams role. But Jahmyr Gibbs, in run and pass situations, he might be someone to target as a steal in fantasy. Do you think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to have decent production for the Lions this year?
See, I just never was a big Jahmyr Gibbs guy, and I think Detroit took him way too early in this draft. And actually looking at this list, some of the guys he's ahead, obviously Kamara, I know he's been up and down, but yeah,
Breece Hall, some of the guys in some of the people in this chat are giving hell that Breece Hall isn't ranked higher.
I mean, I get he came off the injury, but still, I mean, what he showed, what he could do. Pacheco in Kansas City, Sanders is going to be in Carolina now. We talked about a rookie quarterback's going to rely on his running back. He's going to get some production. So to me, Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm not really sure. I'm with you on the Bijan way too high, but I'm also with Jahmyr Gibbs here being way too high. I'm not saying he is a talent and he can't be a productive player, but right off the bat, putting him back there, I think that his ceiling is going to be set a little bit too high, or what the expectation is going to be for him in Detroit.
We're getting good conversation in the comments section here on TikTok Live as people are curious about Breece Hall being 18th on this list. The only reason that I can justify Breece Hall being there, beyond the injury, everyone's aware of that, but I think there will be enough time for him to, even if he's gone for the first few weeks of the season, for him to be a contributor for your fantasy team. It's the Jets' offensive line. The difference between the Lions' offensive line and the Jets is pretty substantial. The Lions are a top 5 offensive line. I know some people kind of throw shade on the Lions at times. You can't do that anymore. They've built well in the trenches on offense, and it's one of the reasons I may like Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit more than Hall. Not just that he's going to be in that dynamic run and receiver role, but it's also because he's behind some big boys in there, and I feel like who are consistent, who have lined up together consistently. So for reasons that speak to the offensive line, that's why I like Jahmyr Gibbs maybe a little bit more than Breece Hall. Breece Hall's talent is there, but the Jets not getting another tackle, that has me a little bit concerned. Pacheco is one I'm curious about because I loved him as a rookie running back. I don't know if I feel the same way about him now. I think he's certainly going to get his opportunities, but I think more teams are aware of him. I'm curious to know what Miles Sanders does as I kind of slide down this list a little bit. Him in Carolina, what he's going to do with Bryce Young certainly has my eye. I love DeAndre Swift in Philadelphia. So, like him being at 28 right now, that's a player I absolutely would target. He wouldn't be my RB1. He would be my second running back. But I think DeAndre Swift could have a really good year in Philadelphia. So where he is on this list, don't overlook that. But when it comes to fantasy, I'm gonna bring Michael. I'm gonna bring you in on this one. I'm really big on looking at offensive lines. You can hear it in how I talk about the Lions. I really care about finding a team that no matter who the running back is, I know I'm going to get good production out of that offensive line blocking. Do you look towards offensive lines, or is it purely the talent of the running back?
It's a mixture of both. It really does depend on the running back themselves, because obviously you look at Derrick Henry, offensive line play might not be the best, but he's just a freak animal that is physical enough, physical at the line himself. So he will easily get the 2 yards before contact, and then he's a great yards after carry. But when you do talk about offensive line play, like Seattle Seahawks come to mind, like Kenneth Walker III, he's going to be a stud, but at the same time, they drafted Zach Charbonnet early, which I thought was pretty shocking because you do have Kenneth Walker. But at the same time, if Walker does go down with an injury, you just plug in Zach Charbonnet, and I believe he would just give you the same amount of production as Kenneth Walker, probably less. But at the same time, that can be a factor of offensive line play being very beneficial to the player themselves.
I totally agree with you. We're going to transition now